Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Adam, alcoholic. I want to thank our secretary, Terry, for asking me to do this. It's truly an honor and a privilege. Really, it's a responsibility to give back what was so freely given to me. And, you know, when I was driving up here, I was thinking, I wonder if they'll actually have any newcomers at this meeting, because I go to meetings where there's no new people. And what I really want to do is talk to you guys, because I was the perpetual chip taker. And, you know, I was new in Alcoholics Anonymous for 17 years. It was really ridiculous. And so it's like I've had so many chips, like a lot of us say. We could play poker, you know, with them. And I just couldn't get it. Being a newcomer for that long is like being in purgatory, you know. It's like I didn't fit in out there. I'd go out there and I'd drink again, and, you know, immediately I'd be separate, different, and alone out there drinking. Just like when I wasn't drinking, I was separate, different, and alone in here. And, you know, by the time I got here, I'd gone through treatment 28 times. And I know that's ridiculous, but that's my story. Every time I pick up a drink, I can't stop. And until it's physically removed from me, I'm stuck. And I had this neighbor, this little 10-year-old kid, and he goes, how come every time you start drinking, you like stay in your house for 3 or 4 days? You know, because he was like one of my neighbors. And I mean, he could see it, and I couldn't see it. You know, and he's like 10 years old. But by the time I finally stopped, I understand now that nobody could transmit surrender to me, and I can't transmit surrender to anybody else. You know, a lot of guys would have me write about step one, and it's like, until I had experienced that liquor store at 559 over and over and over again, you know, and all of those times where, you know, I didn't know what I did the night before and peed in my sock drawer or somebody else's, and I mean, all the things that we do. Because it's like that journey to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization that all of us have to go through. And I can remember sitting in one more rehab, you know, just sobering up, and this shiny lady from Alcoholics Anonymous came in to do a panel, and she's sitting there, and we're dying, you know, with DTs, and she said, if I could give you all the gift of recovery, I wouldn't do it. You know, and I looked at my friend, and I said, what a bitch. And you know what she said? You know what she said? She said, I wouldn't rob you of the journey. And 20 years later, I understand that that journey to surrender is something that for each of us has to be very personal. And I never saw that. I could tell a new guy, I could try to, can't you see it? And I would have guys come to my house, you know, a band of guys from Alcoholics Anonymous, and they would drag me out and take me to a men's stag and put me in the mirror and say, can't you see it? And I would be 129 pounds, and I'd be dirty, and, you know, I just couldn't take care of myself. My house, I'd be wading around in 2 feet of garbage in my house. And no, I couldn't see it. I thought I looked good. It lied to me. It set up this illusion for me that, you know, it's like if I pick up a drink today, the first thing I'll say is, why'd I wait so long? And then it's like, catch me if you can. You know, alcohol just completely, it creates a psychic change for me. Alcohol was an artificial means to a spiritual experience for me. And, you know, what I've discovered is if I can't develop that same sense of comfort and ease and recovery that I was looking for in booze, I'm doomed. And I didn't know that for a long time. And I see that. I see guys come into Alcoholics Anonymous, and women, and they drank just like I did. They got in all the trouble I did. And as soon as they put the drink down, somehow everything works for them.
They fit in, they're part of, the career welcomes them back. And they look at me and they go, "You drank again?" Every time I put the drink down, the first thing they tell me is, "You need to be on medication. You know, why are you so angry? Why can't you sit still? Why are you so emotional?" I'm crying at dog food commercials, you know? And it's like, I discovered that I had heard it a lot, that alcohol wasn't my problem so much as it was my solution. But for me, alcohol created an illusion that my life was manageable. Alcohol made me incredibly powerful. And until I could really see that and really internalize it, I didn't know what you guys were talking about around here. And I really didn't know what you had. And you'll hear that a lot in AA. If you want what we have. You know, what did we have? Every time I stopped drinking, I was throwing chairs across meetings. I was chasing people up and down the freeway. You know, I mean, I got 9 speeding tickets in a week and took a swing at a cop, and I went to jail with 18 months sober. I thought I was sober. You know, my mom's like, "Please drink, for God's sake. You were nicer." You know? So what I discovered is that, you know, first of all, I knew that I couldn't stay stopped for any significant. I would come in here, you know, I'd get 30, 60, 90 days, the perpetual newcomer. You know, I'd get the girl, the job, the house, and the car, and then I would lose it all. And I kept doing that over and over and over again. And I started to look at my history. It's like you stray, you pay. Alcoholics Anonymous to me was like a refrigerator. When you unplug it, everything goes bad. You know, and I discovered it didn't matter if it's an old refrigerator or a new one. It's like once I unplugged from AA for this type of alcoholic, I was doomed. Now, I do see a lot of people that come in here, never work a step, come to meetings once a year to take a cake. Their life gets consistently better. And again, they look at me and they go, "You drank again?" My experience was that when I'm not drinking, I am so separate, different, and alone that, like I said, people are begging me to drink because I was nicer. And the way that plays out for me, see, is when I'm not drinking, I can't control my emotional nature. When I'm not drinking, I'm a prey to misery and depression. When I'm not drinking, I can't manage my personal relationships. When I'm not drinking, I'm full of fear. And the book talks about that. It talks about unmanageability being something that's really separate from my drinking. And a lot of people come in here and they think that their unmanageability was based on it. Drinking created the illusion that my life was manageable. And the way that plays out for me when I'm not drinking is I don't fit in, I'm not part of, you don't understand me, they don't pay me enough, everybody's in my way, she's cheating on me, life's not fair, I gotta drink. And as soon as I pick up a cocktail, I know a new freedom and a new happiness, right? Give me a couple of drinks, I intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle me, right? Couple more, I want to start a business with you. You know what I mean? Give me a couple of drinks and I get really good looking. A couple more, I get rich, you know, and then I'm invisible. I heard that one, I read that in the grapevine the other day and I totally identified with that, but it's like alcohol creates the illusion that my life is manageable. And when I saw that, and at the end of the promises, what it says is we finally saw that God was doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. And when I saw it, I put alcohol in there and I said, I finally saw that booze was doing for me what I could not do for myself. And I discovered that there was a relationship between God and alcohol. And if you get into the ghetto, if you get into the places in this country where there's absolutely nothing, there's only 2 things left: churches and liquor stores. You know why? Because they both give us hope. And when I saw that relationship, I started to understand that if you take my booze away from me and you don't give me something better, I'm doomed. In other words, I have to discover a way to get the same sense of comfort and ease that I was getting from alcohol in recovery. And that's been the process. That has been part of the journey. And part of the surrender I was talking about, when I look back at my life, there was a guy named Johnny Siegel, and he used to talk about being in Mexico in this big hotel, and the hotel overlooks the ocean. And there's a little, strip of shoreline, and in the middle of it, there's this white line that goes out in the ocean, and he's standing there, on a balcony with one of the guys that works in the hotel, and he says, "What is that?" And The guy that works in the hotel said it's the saddest thing. It's actually a riptide, and every year we lose like 7 or 8 tourists. They get stuck in this thing and they swim and they swim and they get tired and they keep swimming and they drown. And he looks at him and he says, well, that's ridiculous. It's only 4 feet wide. Why don't they just swim to the right or left? And that's been my journey to surrender here, because for all those years I couldn't see this disease and that fight like I do now. And I look back at it and I go, how did I ever live like that? And a lot of us feel like that when we, having had an awakening as a result of these steps. It doesn't say having had an awakening from sitting in these rooms or going to therapy or talking about our problems. It was like there was a direct relationship between taking these steps and getting to that place where I had an awakening, where I was able to look back at that part of my life. And I can't believe that I lived like that, that I had been in that spiritual war for all of that time. You know, and I know it. You hear it a lot in Alcoholics Anonymous. Just think it through. Just play the tape through. And that wasn't enough for me. I knew it was an emergency room or handcuffs for me. I knew it, and I did it anyway. I love it when they talk about insanity. Oh, do the same things and expect different results. How about do the same thing, know exactly what's going to happen, and do it anyway? You know, that's insane, right? So thinking it through didn't work for me. You know, I love it. Oh, don't drink no matter what. Now, if I could do that, I know we say that and it's kind of semantics, but if I could just not drink no matter what, I wouldn't be here tonight. You know, maybe I could just join Nancy Reagan's Merry Band of Winners and just say no. You know, I've been through treatment 28 times. You know, they always threw a big book at me on my way out. It would like hit my butt on the way out the door, right? You know, I got a $500,000 big book. That's a scary thought. You know, because in the big book on page 101, it says, you know, any scheme that attempts to shield the alcoholic from temptation is doomed to failure. So they knew. I mean, it's great to spin dry. You know, that's what they used to call detoxes, spin dries. And, you know, that's a good thing. But in and of itself, it was not sufficient to keep me sober. You know, as soon as I got released from county jail, every time I got released from detox, every time I got released from an emergency room, you know, I was one decision away from picking up a drink again. And that's a scary thought too, because if there's nothing between me and that decision, I'm doomed. And I've heard people say this, and I know it's a matter of fact now, is if one guy's sitting in this room and he's working the steps, and he's going to meetings, and he's taking commitments, he's coming early, staying late, reading the book, working with new guys, you think he's the same distance from a drink as the guy over here that's not doing nothing? You know? So I had to see that. I had to look at that, because all of those things are the foundation which stands between me and that decision today. The decision, because if I make a decision, I know what it's like. Once I decide to drink, you'd have to shoot me to stop. Man, some of you guys that know that keep going out and drinking and have gone through that journey to surrender, know that at one time, once you made a decision to drink, you know, I'm not going to call my sponsor, oh, I'm going to drink. It's like, that's the last guy I'm going to call, right? You know, and we think that, and I came to that conclusion that if I stay angry long enough, or I get in that place where I'm so separate, different, and alone that people are looking at me going, you know, I've had people in AA tell me, you should probably drink. You're the angriest guy in the world. And it's like, what I've discovered is that maintenance of the spiritual condition that they talk about in Alcoholics Anonymous is a product of the actions that I've learned to do around here. And as long as I continue to take these actions in Alcoholics Anonymous, I have a spiritual defense against that first drink. I may not have a mental defense. Like you'll hear that all over the place. Never took my first drink drunk, right? You know, I walked in there with a totally sober mind, knowing the consequences and doing it anyway. And that's also one of the things that I really had to look at. I can't stay stopped on my own. You know, there's guys that know more. You ever heard them say at the end of the meeting, keep coming back, it works if you know it? So knowledge isn't going to fix me. You know? And I had to come to that conclusion that there's guys on Skid Row tonight that know more about Alcoholics Anonymous than I'll ever know. And they're drunk. They're trying to get another, you know, Another drink. And I've sat behind dumpsters with those guys, you know, reciting chapter 5, crying my eyes out, wishing I could get back here. So if you're sitting in this room tonight and you're thinking about drinking, sure beats the hell out of being in a bar thinking about getting sober, right? You know? And I know what that's like, to be lost in the middle of this thing. Guys like me end up dead or in prison. You know, and I know that as a matter of fact, that if I live to be 100 years old, I could never pay Alcoholics Anonymous back for what I've been given here. The type of freedom that I have. And, you know, like the holidays, it's the holidays, right? I want to wish you guys happy holidays, but, you know, I used to be terrorized by the holiday. I could never stay sober. Somehow I always ended up in a cage somewhere, locked up because of my resentment at all these happy people. And, you know, the reason I always wondered, why does my family push my buttons? Why do they push my buttons? Someone said, you know why? Because they installed them. But see, I never knew that. I learned that at Alcoholics Anonymous. I learned that by doing the work around here. And it's not that they're toxic. I don't want to get into all of, you know, the inner child. But what I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous was how to look at those relationships and how to come from a loving place and how to be tolerant. And, you know, with people that are really, really, as they say, dysfunctional, I've learned to just go into the rhythm with this thing. And that's because of the steps. And, you know, I had to come to the conclusion that my best thinking wouldn't work here when it came to this, that this was a product of action, that Alcoholics Anonymous is not an intellectual process or an intellectual pursuit. And it took a long time because I had a really strong educational foundation. Academically, I was very successful, very young, and you know, I went from like a math major, very left brain, to like a liberal arts major, to no major. You know, just a process. Hey, it was booze. You know, it just ripped me right out of school. And you know, while everyone else was going to graduate school, I was going to rehab, over and over again. You know, where'd you go? You should see my resume. That's Alcoholics Anonymous, to be where I am today and to have a second chance to turn over all those rocks that I never got a chance to turn over. Because somehow, you know, it's like I woke up in the middle of my life. I don't have a big war story. I picked up a drink at 14 years old. I woke up at 35. I said, what happened? You know, I missed my whole life. And a lot of us know what that's like. And what I found is there's people that aren't drinking that are sitting in these rooms that are still asleep. And I had been like that for a long time. I hadn't had an awakening. I would be sitting in these rooms, daydreaming. I was anywhere but here. And I had to come to the conclusion that in and of myself, self-reliance didn't work, knowledge didn't work, fear wouldn't keep me sober. Getting another strike, going to jail, going to rehab, dying of alcoholism, overdosing, ending up in an emergency room, none of that stuff was sufficient to keep me sober. And the first third of the big book is all around step one, over and over again. It's redundant because it has to be totally ingrained into us. You know, the word concede to our innermost selves that we're bodily and mentally different. Concede meant to surrender with a fight. And all of us, I've noticed, defend our right to drink. At some level, I would defend my right to drink. And I would come up with these things like, no one will know, I deserve it, or what the hell, you know? I mean, I would come up with a justification, like my friend said, rationalize. It's a rational lie. I would rationalize it. You know, I would tell myself this lie, and then I would believe it. So there was an evolutionary process that happened for me in AA. And Bobby Earl used to talk about the Eskimo. You know, you guys have probably heard about the Eskimo. Oh, he was my Eskimo. That comes from a story about a priest and an atheist, and they're in a bar in Alaska. And the priest looks at the atheist and he says, well, why don't you believe in God? And the atheist says, well, I tried God once. And the priest says, well, what do you mean? And the atheist says, well, I was out in a blizzard, and I was walking around, and I couldn't see my hands in front of me, and I said, okay, I'm going to die. If there's a God, please help me. And I got on my knees, and the priest says, well, you're here. You must believe in God. You know what the atheist said? He goes, no, you don't understand. Right after I got off my knees, I bumped into this Eskimo, and he showed me the way back into town. But see, if you're new here, or you're trying Alcoholics Anonymous one more time, or you're in your last 30 days, you know, we don't address the guy in his last 30 days, but there are people in their last 30 days here. I had to start to see that there were people around here that were doing this, that were they weren't just abstinent, they were having fun, and they were free, and they were living their lives, and they were chasing their dreams, and they were having long-term relationships, and all of these things were working for them. And I came to believe initially in the people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it evolved. It became good, orderly direction. And somewhere at the other side of the steps, it became the powerful hand of God. But coming in here, I didn't want to pray. I didn't want God to find out where I was. So there was a process that happened for me. And what I've discovered is that there's a huge difference between faith and trust. And coming into step 2, I had faith because I saw it work for you guys. The difference between faith and trust is like if there was a high wire across this room and some guy came out and started walking on it with like a wheelbarrow and he started walking across the high wire, we'd look at him, we'd think, yeah, he'll probably make it. That's faith. You know what trust is? You get up there and get in the wheelbarrow. Huge difference between faith and trust. And that wheelbarrow and that process is steps 4 through 9. What I think is they should say, rarely have we seen a person fail that's done steps 4 through 9. Rarely have we ever seen anybody do 4 through 9. You know? What I would do is 1, 2, 3, drink, 1, 2, 3, drink, 1, 2, 3, over and over, and turn it over to what? You know what I mean? I couldn't comprehend it. Turn it over, you know, especially with all the preconceived ideas that I'd been fed, you know, growing up in organized religion. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it was how I interpreted it. You know, the message may be pure, but somehow it got fragmented when I heard it, and I believed in a punishing, condemning power in this universe that I wanted to run from, or I couldn't live up to. And it was a process for me, and I had to come to see that at some point. That in 3, we always talk about, you know, if 3 birds are on a wire and one decides to fly away, there's still 3. I'd always think there was 2, but a decision meant absolutely nothing. And for a long time, when I went 1, 2, 3, drink, 1, 2, 3, drink, over and over again, I never really understood the benefit of taking that leap of faith and to get in that wheelbarrow. And what it was it talks about we must be rid of this selfishness. It talks about selfishness, self-centeredness. That we think is the root of our troubles. And it says we must be rid of this or it kills us. Now that's like a suggestion, right? That's like, you know, that's soft language. You know, I read in the original manuscript, they used to have it at this meeting on the wall, rarely have we seen a person fail that's thoroughly followed our directions. You know, and all that stuff was pointed out to me. Like in the beginning of the book, it says precisely how we recover. Now, for the English majors in the room, there's not a lot of latitude for opinion in the word precisely. You know, and you're talking to somebody here, me, that tried everything, like most of us. You know, I mean, I've been in therapy since I was 9 years old. And by the time I was into this process and I'd done the work in Alcoholics Anonymous, the change was so profound that they were asking me questions. You know? And I was able to see the truth about this disease and how I interacted with people and the impact that I had in my community. And I was able to change that with the help of a loving God and you people and these rooms. And that process, you know, it started by me becoming clear about what these things are that I needed to be rid of. You know, it says that 3 has little lasting effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of. The key word again was be rid of these things that were blocking me. And it doesn't, like someone else said, it doesn't say face and cope with, face and deal with, face and talk about. It doesn't say face and go to therapy over. It says face and be rid of. And what I discovered was, by default, if I face and be rid of the things that are blocking me from this power, what am I left with? I'm left with the power. So For the first time, I discovered that I didn't have to believe in this in order to get well. All I had to do was take the actions. And I know that sounds like a contradiction, but it's very much like if you go to the gym every day, does it matter if you don't believe you're going to get strong? If you do it, you'll get the results. And this was a relationship of cause and effect. Having had an awakening as a result of these steps, it's basically saying if I take these steps, I'm going to get this awakening. I'm going to get a type of spiritual experience that I was looking for in booze. Take my booze away, give me something better. And the problem is there's a process to get to that which was better for me. And, you know, you'll hear it a lot in Alcoholics Anonymous. The only requirement for membership in AA is a desire. Now, that may be the only requirement to sit in this room tonight. But for an alcoholic like me, there's another huge requirement for me to stay here. And it talks about it, you know, there is a solution. It says none of us like the leveling of our pride, the soul searching, and the confession of shortcomings that the process requires for its successful consummation. And the word requirement is in there, the word process is in there, and then it says consummation, which means completion. So it's saying there's a process, 4 through 9. And it talks about consummation, and I never saw a lot of this stuff. I had to have people that knew how to do this, that had had the type of awakening and change, take me through this. And I wouldn't be talking about it or up here tonight if it wasn't because I totally 100% know that this process works. And that there is an amazing, amazing set of principles here, spiritual in nature, which when applied will relieve me of the obsession to drink and make me whole. And I found that through this work. And until I got to that place where nothing else worked, and it was 2 choices here. Now, I love Alcoholics Anonymous because here we are with 2 choices. Jails, institutions, and death, happy, joyous, and free. And you know what the alcoholic says? Can I get back to you? You know, our thinking is a little different. It's like the problem drinker and the real alcoholic, right? Now, the difference between the problem drinker and the real alcoholic goes something like this. If the problem drinker and the real alcoholic are sitting in a jail cell for drunk driving, the problem drinker's sitting in the cell and he's thinking, you know, I knew I shouldn't have had that 5th beer. Why did I have that 5th beer? You know what the real alcoholic's thinking, right? Why did I take Sepulveda? So my thinking is definitely different. And, you know, there was a thing, that's basically dishonest, right? You know, a lot of dishonesty. I met her in rehab. I can't believe she drank, you know? So the thing is that I had to face and be rid of a lot of these old ideas that had held me in this bondage. This is like the only prison where the key's inside. And I never saw that this is a spiritual process that let me out of a spiritual prison. And the only time I really ever felt free was when I was all lit up. And that freedom, at some point, it's like alcohol gave me the wings to fly, and then it slowly took away the sky. And I go back to the same thing, that's why we always go back to alcohol, is because I start to look at what it did for me. Like, it gave me the courage to go ask that pretty girl to dance, or it gave me the courage to go out for that job interview. It gave me the courage to face the world. And a lot of these things that I was looking for, I have to start looking at in inventory. And I have to start looking at what it was. Where did that fear come from? Driven by 100 forms of fear. And through the work, and a lot of people hate that word, work. It's like, you know, it's like the second dirtiest word next to help in Alcoholics Anonymous, you know? We don't like help either. But as I started to do this, I started to get free. You know, it talks about things like self-esteem, right? Don't you know who I think I am? Anybody harms, threatens, or interferes with who I think I am, I immediately go to resentment. Like my pride. Don't you know who I pretend to be? Holmes, you know what I mean? You see that a lot, this arrogant pride that we have. And if anything harmed, threatened, or interfered with that image, that projected self that the book talks about, I would immediately go to resentment. And you guys know what we do with resentment, right? I drink poison and hope you die. You know, that's what I do with it. You know, what is my security? What I need to be okay? If anybody threatens that, I immediately go back to resentment. What is my ambition? What I want? And it's like, I had to start to look at all of these old ideas that were driving me. That was the driving force. I started to get clarity on the 7 aspects of self that the book talks about: esteem, security, ambition, personal relations. Personal relations for me were my deep-seated beliefs about the way a real best friend was supposed to treat me, the way a real mom, if she didn't treat me like Mrs. Brady, I hated her, you know? I had all these resentments, the way a real teacher was supposed to be, the way a real girlfriend. If anything harmed, threatened, or interfered with this belief system that I had held so dearly throughout the years, I would go back to resentment. For us, it's like I was driven by emotion. An alcoholic is almost like emotion over intellect. Normal people are intellect over emotion. So what they do, those other people out there, is they look at these things, they look at the possibilities, and they make a decision based on intellect. They're rational thinking. I make decisions based on emotion. I immediately go for the throat to defend what I think I'm going to lose, and then I say, oh, I'm sorry, 10th step. And I had to be able to see that. There's a guy named Howard P. that talks about baby elephants, and he always talks about when these elephants are babies, what they do is they take these huge chains and they tie them around the elephant's legs, and you know, he just went to India, so he probably knows this, and they tie them to these big trees, and every time the elephants try to run away, they hurt their leg, they can't get away. As they get older, they grow huge. These things are monsters. All they do is they take a little wooden stake and a little rope, and they tie it around the elephant's leg. And when the elephant tries to run, it remembers the pain. And that elephant, if there was a fire in that jungle, that elephant would die where it sits. And the reason is because of the belief system. My belief system had been so established that it was killing me. And until I could uncover, discover, and discard these ideas, face and be rid of the things that were blocking me, I was doomed. And you know what? It's pretty hard to do that with an autobiography. You know, because I wasn't learning anything that I didn't already know. I already know my story. I had to have somebody take me through this and show me. And I believe in that today. You know, I believe sponsorship's like, why go through an uncharted minefield without a guide? You know? And through this process, I've got a lot of freedom. I have a life which, you know, my life, there should be background music, you know? And it's because of doing the work in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, like the conduct inventory. Everybody in AA says, oh, don't get in a relationship, right? You hear that a lot. And it's, once I started to look at inventory based on my conduct, where I was selfish, self-seeking, dishonest, where did I unjustifiably arouse bitterness, jealousy, suspicion, where was I inconsiderate? And then it says subject each relationship to that test. As I started to do that, I started to get total clarity on the impact that I had in relationships, on the impact I had on other people, and why it didn't work. And it was like, it was remarkable to get that kind of enlightenment out of something that I never even knew was there. I'd used this book for a coaster for years. You know, the big book turns out to be the second best-selling book in the world, next to the Bible. I never knew that, you know. In closing, if somebody did to me what I had done to myself, I would have killed them. I know those are strong words, but if someone had done to me what I did to myself throughout the years, if somebody did to me what I had done to others, I probably would have killed them, you know? And I looked at that and I saw it. And when I came in these rooms, you think I wanted to pray? Like I said, I didn't want God to find out where I was. But those 3 simple, fundamental relationships with God, self, and others had been totally destroyed. There was nothing left. I was bankrupt in each of those 3 areas. If you really look at the steps, what you'll see is steps 1 through 3 by design recreate and develop a relationship with God. Steps 4 through 7 recreate and develop a relationship with self. Steps 8 and 9 recreated and developed a relationship with others. 10 maintains it with self, 11 maintains it with God, and 12 maintains the relationship with others. So coming out of the steps, for the first time in my life, I was able to live in harmony in those 3 fundamental relationships. And, you know, all of the churches couldn't do that for me. It brought me back to God, but like I said, you know, if God scares you out of here, I promise you, booze will scare you back in. And this process has opened a door to all of that for me. It's like this little kid, he comes up to his dad and he says, "Hey, Dad, can we play?" And his dad's really busy. This guy's like, you know, the kid's like 5, and the kid keeps bugging him. So the dad gets out a National Geographic, and they always have these maps of the world in National Geographic, and he rips the map of the world up into like 50 pieces, and he gets a little piece of tape, and he gives it to the kid, and he says, "Go put this back together, kid, and when you're done, we'll play." He figures it's going to take the kid half an hour, right? At least. The kid comes back in 2 minutes. He's got the whole map of the world all taped back together. And the dad says, "That's amazing. How'd you do that?" Caught his attention, right? You know what the little kid said? He said, "Dad, on the back of the map of the world was a picture of a man. I put the man back together, and the whole world fell into place." And, you know, the reality of that story is that this is the spiritual technology that rebuilt the man for me. Steps 1 through 3 with God, steps 4 through 7 with self based on my perception of others, steps 8 and 9 through amends with others, and then maintain it in 10, 11, and 12. It's remarkable to come from that place to where I am now as a product of taking these actions. And what I discovered is I really couldn't separate cause from effect. The more that I did this, the more I got free of it. And I've also discovered that I don't need to judge people that don't do the work around here. It's none of my business. A lot of them stop drinking, they come to meetings, take a couple commitments, never work a step, and their life gets consistently better. And I know they judge me, but you know what? It's none of my business. It's none of my business. People like me die or go to prison. There's nowhere else for us. Jails, institutions, and death. There is nowhere else. And I know what it's like to be laying out there in the street, dirty, talking to myself, 129 pounds. I can't stop, and I can't stay stopped. But for the grace of God and Alcoholics Anonymous, I have a life that's absolutely incredible. I'm traveling all over the place. I got a freedom like I never dreamed of. So, you know, you have to look at that if you want what we have. You know, and it's more than just sitting in these rooms, not drinking, killing ourselves with coffee and cigarettes, you know? Because all of that stuff slowly faded for me. It's in other areas. It went into drinking and gambling, and, you know, it went into compulsive spending, and, you know, I did it with lust. I mean, you know, can't go to that meeting again, can't go to this meeting again. You know, we all act out in these areas. And I think it's almost normal to do that. And what it says in the book is when we straighten out spiritually, we straighten out mentally and physically. And what I discovered is there's like 400 12-step programs. And you know what? They're all the same except for the first half of step 1. So this is the mother of all of those programs. And the funniest thing of all is 4 through 9. It's really identical. Rarely have we seen a person do 4 through 9. And when I did that, I straightened out in all the other areas. So it all starts and ends with Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you for letting me share.
Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control is connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.